Hi guys, my name's Ruth, welcome to this week's video, and I just want to say now that my microphone just broke, so I hope the sound is going to be okay. I'm just using the microphone on my phone, so fingers crossed it'll still work alright. And today I want to talk all about facing fears, because it feels like in the world right now, and especially where I am, there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of talk of coronavirus and climate change and flooding, and it's felt like it's been a month of total kind of uncontrollable external things happening that can really send a lot of us into a spin of fear and make us feel like really unsettled. And especially if you're a bit of a control freak like I can be, it can make you feel really out of control, and it's not an easy thing to deal with. So in this video I thought it'd be helpful to talk about like fear being part of our hunter-gatherer primal brain. So our reptilian brain is very much geared towards protecting us from danger, and so when we have these feelings of fear kick in, it's often the fact that, you know, it's this reptilian part of our brain which puts us in the fight or flight or freeze response, where like way back when it might have been like we were out foraging food and there was a tiger, and all of a sudden we're like, oh my god, there's a tiger. So it's a very imminent present fear that we need to respond to. And so that was great then, and potentially would either save us or we die, but there wasn't much, you know, we just get on with it or we die. Whereas now the tiger, especially where I live, you know, we no longer have to run from tigers, most of us don't, but the feeling of still feeling fearful about things is like the tiger now morphs into our mortgage payments, our bills, our work emails, our relationships, our having to turn on the news and constantly hearing about the coronavirus, which is apparently sweeping the world. So the tiger comes in new forms, it morphs into something different, and often the things that it morphs into are more of a drip than a present fear and then it's over within 5 minutes. So this prolonged feeling of being in this fear state is one of like the worst causes of chronic health conditions. It's definitely a huge cause of anxiety disorders and things that, you know, are just much more prevalent now in the world we live in. So the idea that fear is a natural thing, so first off, just to say, fear is totally normal and it visits us all, and dependent on our past experiences and our own makeup, you know, fear may affect us more than some people, and other people might not be as affected by fear, but it's definitely present for us all in some different ways. And one of the things that I find really interesting is that, you know, fear is something we really feel in the body. So that the idea, if we think about it, like if we really just take a moment now to think about like how often do we feel fearful in our day-to-day lives. And this, like, the depressing thing is for me is I think I feel fearful a heck of a lot of my day, and I'd like to say that that wasn't true, and I feel kind of weak and pathetic for saying that it is true, but I do spend a lot of time feeling fearful about things that are going to go wrong, and fearful about my health, other people's health, fear about security, fear about things that are completely out of my control, like all of the stuff that's going on at the moment in the world, fear about climate change, so many things that I feel. I do think I live a lot of my life in that fear state, and I know that so many other people will as well. And it's pretty depressing when you think that, if you think that you spend quite a lot of your time, or the majority of your time, feeling in that fearful state. And just to think about how that feels in the body, so to be aware of it. So, you know, like I said then, I felt a little bit pathetic for saying that I feel fearful quite a lot of the time, but just to have that awareness that it's there, and to think about how it feels in your body. So for example, I know for me, I feel it wash over me. So sometimes I'll feel it like it goes from head to toe, and this kind of just like my stomach will drop, I'll get a lump in my throat, and I will just feel like I'm getting smaller as well. So that's my experience of it. Some people, you know, like worry, I think the word worry comes from the word strangle. So some people really feel like constricted here, like, you know, our breathing changes, or we may feel constricted around our stomach, you know, tying yourself in knots. These sayings all come from these bodily sensations that we can have around fear. So just being aware of how it affects us in our body is a really interesting way to start to have a relationship with fear, because the way I see it is fear is like it's a universal experience, and it, depending on how we deal with it and our relationship with it, is like we're always going to be fearful throughout our life, and the way that we choose to have a relationship with fear really dictates the impact that it's going to have on our lives. So one of the things that I find really interesting is that fear isn't, you know, most of us, fear isn't the preferred way we would like to feel. However, fear is, you know, it's a valid, you know, we can't always be happy all the time. So fear is going to come into our lives. And in this world that we live in now, you know, I just think that unless we go and live a completely alternative lifestyle and try and go off grid, which brings with it its own fearful feelings, is that, you know, fear is rife, and it's pushed in our faces through the news and through everything that's going on. So we can do our best to switch off to that stuff, but we do live in a world that is very much fear dominated and fear driven, because fearful people become very self-isolating, and fear tends to block our creativity, our empathy, our kindness, our ability to relate to others. So it's no wonder that the powers that be, in my opinion, are, you know, it's in their best interest to keep us in this fearful state. So just to be aware anyway of the fact that fear is going to come and visit us, and ways that we can change our relationship with that. So I've written some things here that I ask myself when I get this wash of fear, which is, first of all, just being aware, okay, I've all of a sudden become really fearful. I've entered into this really fearful mode. What's this about? Like, let's just lay it out. Like, what am I feeling in my body? And what's this fear coming from? Or what do I think it's coming from? So I ask myself those questions, and I say to myself, is it real? Is it happening right now? Is this real? Or is it a perceived anxiety about something that could happen in the future? So I ask myself those questions, and I say, okay, what's the worst case? If this thing is going to happen, what's the worst case scenario? Like, sometimes that worst case scenario can be really bad. Oftentimes it's not so bad. It's more just, it's questioning our sense of identity and our, potentially, like, our ego and how we see ourselves, really. And then I also ask, from past experience, how likely is it that this is going to happen? So if I've been in a similar jam before, or had similar issues crop up before, I'm like, okay, I got really fearful about this last time, and did things work out? Oftentimes the answer will be yes. Other times the answer will be, actually no, they didn't work out, and the worst case thing did happen, which is a bummer, but it does happen. But asking yourself those questions, just getting really clear, and having some things that you ask yourself when you become really fearful. And often for me, what it is that there's a surface fear of something that I can have some control over, because actually the thing that I'm really fearful of is something that I don't have control over. So because I don't have control over that thing, I then grip onto something that I feel like I can have some control over, and then that's what I present as the thing that I'm fearful of. but often there's a lot of other stuff going on underneath that. So it's quite complicated, but it's a good one to ask yourself, what do I think I'm fearful of? And then almost like digging a little deeper and saying, is that really what I'm fearful of? Is there anything going on under the surface? You know, oftentimes, like just last week, there was something where I was in bits about something that I was very fearful of, and I was unconsolable. I was crying, I was so emotional, I just got totally taken down by the fear. And it was only after probably a couple of days of being a bit of a pain in the arse and being very much gripped by the fear that the real root of the fear came out, and it wasn't what the presenting thing was, it was something much deeper. So that can often happen, but it's only because I kept asking myself what's going on with this fear, and kept talking about it in my mind, kept talking about it with my partner, that I was able to get to that deeper underlying issue. And also, like I say just then, can you talk to someone about it? So is there someone that you trust that you can talk to about this issue? That can be massively helpful. So I would definitely recommend trying to, like, a problem shared is a problem halved. It's true, depending on who you speak to, because sometimes if you speak to a hypochondriac or someone who's well more fearful than you, they can actually make it worse. So try and talk to somebody you know is like, you know, one more up the game than you, or a bit wiser or older or more experienced. Someone you can trust is what I would always say. And then really trying to look at your relationship with the fear. So when the fear comes to visit, rather than being like, I don't want to be fearful, I don't want to acknowledge this, being sort of like, okay, well, can I lean into the fear a bit and be like, what's this about? Why is this making me so fearful? And not always pushing it away, because it's like, you know, we say what we resist persists. So it's the same with these fearful emotions, is if we resist it, it will tend to keep coming back and back all through our life. Whereas if we can look at where it's coming from and potentially look at changing our response to it and being a bit more soft, so softening into it, leaning into it, and not just becoming really like tight and wanting to run away, that can change how we feel about feeling fearful, because it's not going to go away. And the only thing we can do is look at our relationship with fear, look at why we're so fearful of certain things and not so fearful of others, and also as well to just realise that fear is a part of our experience. And if we're having a very bad reaction to feeling fear, then it may be that we've not given that part of ourselves the nurture and the kindness that it needs. So trying as much as we can to like ask those questions and not always just be so resistant to being fearful. So I hope this has helped. Please let me know below your relationship with fear, what you do to help yourself, and I will be back next week with another video, and hopefully the world will maybe not be quite as fearful this time next week. Alright, thanks guys, bye.